Create Art Podcast. Interview Peter Dazeley. Hello, friend. This is Timothy Kimo Bryan, your head instigator for Create Art Podcast, where I use my over 30 years of experience in the arts and education world to help you tame your inner critic and create more than you consume. This week in this episode, I am pleased to be joined by Peter Dazeley. How did I get a hold of this guy? Well, I'm glad you asked. So there is this publishing company called Trope, and it is out of Chicago. I'll put in the links to the show notes. And they, on occasion, reach out to me, specifically Lauren Bell. So thank you, Lauren. Love you. Love your work. And they say, hey, Tim, there's this new author here with a new book out. Or, it doesn't have to be a new author. It can be an author that's been around for a while. But they like to, Lauren Bell likes to give me first crack at it, especially if somebody has a new book coming out through Trope Publishing. And that's what happened this time. And that's how I got introduced to Peter Dazeley. So Peter is a fine artist photographer. Just was awarded the British Empire Medal in the Queen's New Year's Honours list in January of 2017 for his services to photography and to charity. He's a life member of the Association of Photographers. Started, doing this whole living thing way back in London, England since 1948. So he's been around for a minute or two. He studied photography at Holland Park Comprehensive, which is now known as Socialist Eton. Meticulous planner and imaginative problem solver, and has pioneered many photographic techniques that have become the norm. Sarah Ryder Richardson recently said of him, making the ordinary look extraordinary is Dazeley's gift. And she represents Dazeley in the UK. Now, his work has won awards from organizations across the world, including the Association of Photographers, the Royal Photographic Society in the UK, EPICA in France, Applied Arts Magazine in Canada, Graphis Inc. in the United States, and Dazeley's fine art work is produced as platinum prints by 31 studios in Gloucestershire. So I'm sure, you're all thinking to yourselves, hey, Tim, why would you have this guy from the UK who's a photographer, who's, a fantastic photographer on your show? Well, here's the thing. We all start somewhere. We all have to start our career somewhere. He started his back when he was 15. And you may be starting yours while you're 30 or 40 or 50. And that's okay. But to see what he has done throughout the years and to hear his story is to really get to know the man, and you're going to get a lot of inspiration out of this interview for whatever craft you're in. You're also going to get a wake-up call about what AI is doing to all of us in the arts and in the world in entirety, to our jobs and whatnot. So without further ado, I'd like to go ahead and get this interview started off, and I'll see you on the other side of the interview. All right. Well, I want to thank everyone for joining us here today. And like I said in the intro, we have Peter here with us. Peter, how are you doing today?
I'm doing very well. Thank you for inviting me to your lovely podcast and for interest in what I do.
Absolutely. Well, myself, I'm not a fine art photographer like yourself. I'm the point and click guy, but I really enjoy
with that.
Well, I really enjoy photography. But one of my good friends and students, and she's also my tattoo artist, she's been on the show. And when I reached out to her and said, hey, I've got Peter coming on, she was absolutely floored. She didn't have any questions because she was a bit starstruck, but I understand photography through her eyes, and the little bit that I do understand is fantastic. And then when I saw your work, I was absolutely blown away. What I'd like to start off and first ask you is, as a photographer, what's the best part of creating a book? You have soon to have 5 books out there, but what's the best part of crafting a book to explain your work?
Yeah, that's I suppose really when it actually physically arrives on your desk. The lovely thing is doing talks about your work and signing books. That's a kind of nice thing to do. I've been very successful with the 4 books I've done in London. 3 of them did second editions, and something that just to throw in, I was amazed talking to some publishers about how many books out of 100 earned back their advance. Mm-hmm. And the answer was 1 in 100. So I think I've been very lucky. I'm keeping my fingers firmly crossed for monochrome.
Absolutely. And we're going to definitely make sure that everyone has the links in the show notes to go grab that book. I've already pre-ordered it. Now I can't wait to get it coming out in October. Oh, absolutely. And that's one of the things that I think people don't understand about publishing a book is that the publisher is looking for those advanced copies and those advanced orders. So when everyone hears this podcast, which should be coming out in late August or early September, get in there, get that early order in. So that way, maybe monochrome has a second edition, a third edition, a fourth edition. And, let's try to make you a millionaire, basically.
Okay. Thank you.
Absolutely. What do you think is the most challenging part of the process of creating a book, that is discussing photography?
The most important thing is to find a publisher that you work with. My first publisher, it was kind of difficult. I mean, what you buy into is all the expertise. You buy into the editing, you buy into the publicity, the retailing. I was working on a photographic book, my first book on London, Unseen London. And I was working on a photographic book, but my publishers decided that I needed to have somebody to write some copy around the pictures, which I have to admit was a brilliant suggestion. And the writer that I worked with, Mark Daly, was just superb. But of course, when there's 2 people on the book, the little bit of money you're getting for the book gets cut by 50%. But, I mean, there is a bit of a battle as to how your control over the book is passing to somebody else. And as I got more into it, I learned more of how to attack about what I wanted and what I thought was more important, and explaining why it was important. So, I mean, it is publishing, if only 1 book in 100 makes it some advance, it's quite a difficult profession to be in. So I guess they're very careful. The lovely thing about Crowns was that the lovely Sam Landers of Trope in Chicago just picked up on my work. We talked a little bit on the phone. He came to London. We had dinner. We went through what he hoped for and what I hoped for. And because most of the work has been produced over the last decade, it was quite easy. I was able to give him all the images within a month. Mm-hmm. And pretty much instantly it was off to the printers. That was a really lovely working experience with a new publisher.
That's got to be fantastic when you can vibe with them like that and get something knocked out in a relatively short amount of time. Because, when we're talking about publishing books, some people take a year or 2 years to get to the point where they're publishing, and you're already, like I said, in October of 2023 of this year, your book is coming out. With monochrome, my question about that is, why this book right now?
I suppose in my eyes, it's a kind of a little pop against AI. This isn't something that it's taking back photography to its origins. Whereas now with AI, you can put in a few words into a computer and it will create an image for you. The image may not be particularly great, but AI doesn't forget, it just learns and it scrapes images from the internet. And so it could be your picture or somebody else's picture, and they could say, well, I'd like this picture. Can you turn it into a Picasso? So from that point of view, I'm drifting away from your question, but it's the problem with the future. The copyright cat is out of the bag for the future creators, and it's going to be very difficult, if not impossible, to get it back in. The governments talk very wisely about how they're going to control AI, but I think dream on, that isn't going to happen.
As a person that works for the government myself, I'm not representing any entity in the government, but I know that for us, we're not knowledgeable enough about AI we can talk a strong game about, what we're going to do with AI and how we're going to restrict it and how we're going to enforce laws. But many of us don't understand how it works and the actual impact it's going to have on everyday people, on fine artists such as yourself. With monochrome, and we're going to talk about AI in just a few moments here, but with monochrome, who is this book for? Is it for the art enthusiasts? Is it for the everyman on the street? Who do you think is going to pick up this book besides me and read it?
Well, I hope everybody on the street's going to pick it up, but I guess it's more aimed at photographers and lovers of art. It's also a bit of a do-it-yourself book there. We also have a section and pictures on the process of platinum printing and how it's done. I mean, it has quite wonderful and threatening chemicals and things involved. But famous photographers like Irving Penn used to do their own prints. For me, I use one of a company called 31 Studios in Gloucester in the UK, who are the prominent platinum printers in the UK. Mm-hmm. And it's like when I work with different people, when I work with a stylist or a set builder or a hair and makeup artist, everybody brings something to the party. So that's what my platinum printers are bringing. They're adding value. And the prints are archival. They're not like, some of the early digital prints where they started to fade with a little bit of daylight. These will last many lifetimes.
And I remember when we were talking in our pre-interview a week back or so, that we were talking about the archival quality of this platinum printing process and that it can actually last. And I think you said it can last hundreds of years. Is that correct? Or
many lifetimes? Mm-hmm. Long lifetimes, I hope.
Absolutely. And that's something that we can pass on to our kids, to our generations. I've recently got into a little bit of ancestry and I was doing it for free because, well, free is for me. But, I was tracing back my family roots, 500, 600, 700 years and, wishing that this process was available back then so that way I could see what these people look like today. If we do this process now, this platinum printing now, 200, 300, 400, 500 years in the future, our descendants can see, hey, this is what we were interested in. This is what we looked like. This is how we dressed. And isn't that, for me, that's a fantastic gift to give somebody 500 years in the future.
Well, the world has changed. I'm sure most of us all had family albums of pictures that we could look back on. Now everything is on a computer or on a phone. They're easily lost. I mean, my images are just backed up in different places all over the place to make sure that, up in the cloud and at home and in the studio. And, that's a very frightening thing.
Mm-hmm. With a power surge, it can be all gone tomorrow. And that's absolutely frightening.
Yes, absolutely. But hopefully people will start making more of a collection of their family for their children in the future. It's a good thing to do.
And since our pre-interview conversation, I've made it a point, my wife and I have made it a point to make sure that we have a family album. I've only got about 8,000 pictures of my girls. So not every one of those pictures I want to keep, but we're starting that process and it is labor intensive, probably going to last us the rest of our life, but very rewarding to revisit those times and go, why did we take this picture? What was happening at the time? And then to be able to, give it to our daughters, and after we pass or in our lifetime. And what a great gift.
Yeah, absolutely. It reminds me of probably one of my most favorite pictures and relates back to you, point and press and recording things. And one of the tips for a photographer or somebody is always to have a camera. With a phone, that's so much easier. But there have been several things that I've seen. I wish I'd had a camera with me in the past. But my favorite picture, my wife was having a cesarean operation and I'm always up for sort of blagging things. So I'm sitting there with my wife's head. And then I say to the surgeon, could I possibly take a picture? And he said, well, just hang on a minute. I'll lower the blind. And I got 2 pictures on a point and press. of his first breath, blood and everything, and the team around him holding him. And for me, it was such a lovely image, but being into a bit of social media, the first thing I did was send it out to all my friends and everything. What I really hope to do in life is to create emotion. And this picture certainly created a lot of emotion, good and a lot of bad. And why are you doing this? You shouldn't be up here. We shouldn't be able to see this. So, I mean, to me, that really tickles me that people can be shocked by something as wonderful.
Myself as a father and, being there in the delivery room, I had twins. Well, my wife had the twins. I was just there, not passing out, but I wish I could have had a picture of that because I know the emotion that I felt and the emotions that she was going through when that happened. Just a funny story here because we had twins. I remember cutting the cord for the first and then cutting the cord for the second. And then the nurse saying, okay, you got to cut another cord. And I said, no. We came in with 2. We're going to leave with 2. Whatever cord this is not ours. But yeah, just having that intimate moment is a wonderful thing that, I'll tell my daughters, to my dying breath about all the emotions that I had, but to actually have a picture of it is magical. I do have a picture of them after they're all cleaned up, laying with mom and that, but just the moment of them popping out and, cutting that cord and just having that image.
I have to say my son who's now 12 years old isn't very keen on people seeing it. I gave a talk to his school about my work and I was sworn that I wouldn't under any circumstances show the picture.
Well, that's always something that you can blackmail them for good behavior.
Yes, good idea.
So we touched a little bit on AI and how has AI impacted, professional photographers like yourself? And is there any upside to AI that you can see?
Oh, I think there's huge amount of upside, but OMG, where do I start? It's advancing at an unprecedented rate. It's obviously great. It's 20% more accurate at spotting cancer on scans than doctors. Mm-hmm. And possibly that they say it might even do it more sympathetically. Patients with artificial limbs can control them with the help of AI.
Right.
We now have AI news presenters on TV. Mm-hmm. I'm not quite sure how we'll ever know the truth, but whether we ever know the truth now, I don't know. Scientists with AI in Japan are showing volunteers pictures of trains, teddy bears and clocks. And then they're able to scan their brains and able to recreate the pictures from their brains. So it's wonderful. I mean, a bit more of fun. I gave a talk to my 12-year-old school about my dyslexia and the fact that I consider it as a sort of problem-solving superpower. Mm-hmm. And there's an example of that, of how to problem solve. So I put into ChatGPT 3 words, speech, school, and dyslexia, and was instantly presented with a speech of 2 pages. So to prove the problem solving, I then got one of the boys to read it out for me. Then I asked AI, what are the dangers of our AI? And got this rather worrying answer. There is the risk of superintelligence. If we are not careful, AI could become smarter than humans, leading to a situation where we lose control of technology. This could lead to an existential threat to humanity, as we could no longer influence our own destiny. I mean, it also doesn't take into account the potential loss of jobs and the tasks being automated. But clearly in photography, you can have a picture created for you with words. It may not be brilliant right now, but it's only going to get better. It's just going to learn and become more powerful and better at what it's doing. And it's scraping images off the internet as reference and as guides to use and reuse. And all those pictures on the internet belong to people. Mm-hmm. So I don't know. As I said earlier, the copyright cat is out the bag. Your picture could be my great picture tomorrow afternoon. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to sue me? Is the time and effort and the amount you can sue me for. I mean, if I'm on MBM, maybe you're well worth pursuing me, but in general, it's going to be very difficult. And people like Getty Images are now sort of taking on AI because I'm sure that's where they get their ideas from.
What do you think are some limits for AI? And again, this is coming from for me, a position of ignorance, but ignorance in my estimation is a good thing because I get to learn something. And I'm going to tie this into your book, Monochrome, which is talking about a process that was developed back in 1876 by William Willis. Do you think AI could create a new way to make, or a new process in making photography?
Yeah. I mean, I really think that, if we talk about the iPhone, for example, just how brilliant is that? We have something like in excess of 8,000 engineers working on the iPhone camera alone. The quality of what an iPhone can do. I guess probably the technology behind what it's doing is right. I mean, so much of our life has been taken care of by AI before we kind of knew that. So I'm sure it's everywhere. I mean, just a little bit for photography, it seems to me quite remarkable what an iPhone can do. Last Christmas, I was in Florida and we were on the beach in Naples. I was we were taking pictures at sunset and I was using a very expensive Nikon camera. And my kids were shooting on an iPhone. So the difficult thing about shooting at sunset is you're shooting against the sun. So it's quite difficult to control. But the iPhone pictures were just brilliant compared to the Nikon camera. I mean, just remarkably brilliant in how that it dealt with the light. So we don't know where I think it's a big part of our life already and we're not totally aware of it. I mean, it's going to be used in call centers to get you started. They may have to put you through to somebody, but I think it'll probably do an awful lot of that work. Tell us what you've called us about, etc.
When you say that, I was just thinking back to former jobs that I've had. And one of my former jobs was a tech support for Verizon Wireless for cell phones. So in the early days of, well, I won't say smartphones, but like Palm Pilots, the precursors to the iPhone and our smartphones. And I'm just thinking back to those days and going, oh my gosh, we could have AI doing that job. If we're having a problem with our phone or with our computer or even with our car, we could be talking to a computer instead of a human being and, that taking somebody's job.
But it made me very good at doing some of those things, doing what doctors do because it has so much information and understanding. And as it gets more and more, it will become more and more useful and powerful. I think it's a difficult job answering a phone as you're talking about, and it probably would do that in a more sympathetic way.
Absolutely. I would definitely be more sympathetic than a computer. Or an AI entity or whatnot, for sure. Now that we've done some doom and gloom for folks, but it's okay. Because I think one thing that AI doesn't have, and I don't know when it will have it, is the creative spark that humans have. It can take a suggestion, but can it make that suggestion? Can it, start off with that kernel of an idea on its own?
I think it definitely will happen. I mean, it's very interesting. We've had a photographic competition in this country that was won with a picture of two people, and after he'd won the prize, the photographer said that he'd created it on AI. And what was interesting for me was that, like in the old days when artists were painting portraits, they quite often weren't very good at painting fingers. And in the picture that won the prize, the women have fingers like sausages. Mm-hmm. So, but again, that's now, in time to come, they will use AI to build a picture.
I like women with sausage fingers.
That's the wrong word. Sausage isn't the right word for America, is it? It's a British word.
with AI, taking over so many facets of our life, what advice would you give somebody that is just starting off in photography? Because a lot of my listeners here are just starting off in the art world. They're just, really getting bitten by that creative bug. What's one or two things that you would say to somebody just starting off in photography?
Always have a camera with you. As I said before, I have great belief in experimenting, trying to do something, trying to create your own style, experimenting and making mistakes, try and be difficult, trying to be different, and quite often it's some of the advertising work that I do. I work with some very super creators, art directors and designers. And working with them, I quite often get dragged screaming doing something that why are we doing it? This doesn't seem quite right to me. And then when the ad comes out in a couple of months ago, that's fantastic. I would have never got there under my own. And so to me, go look at work, go to the bookshops, go look at other people's work, get them not to copy people, but to try and make your twist on it. Try and be difficult. Try and come up with a theme that will show interest to lots of different people. But keep trying, keep taking the pictures. And I love the idea of, once you've taken a picture, print it, sign it and date it and stick it up on the wall. I think, be proud of what you do. Mm-hmm. Show people.
Well, as you can see behind me, that's what I do. I've got a lot of pictures, a lot of books behind me, and some of them are mine. Most of them are mine.
Me too, behind me as well.
Wow. The blonde lady with the mouth blurred out. That's wow.
These are from their posters from exhibitions that I have. So
they are just fantastic. When and this is going to get into a little bit of your history here.
So it's not too boring, but I'm a born and bred London photographer. I was educated in the 50s and 60s at a school called Holland Park in Kensington in London. It was a bit like the Wild West in some ways. We had 2,500 kids. It had amazing facilities, including swimming pool, gymnasiums, woodwork, metalwork, engineering, technical drawing office, domestic science, language laboratory. And finally, brilliant for me, it had photographic studios and dark rooms. I was taught on plate cameras with plate glass negatives. It's a tiny speck of a lifetime that I've gone from plate glasses to digital. It's not a whole lifetime. But I think the best thing about school was, that photography found me. But it was a difficult time. I was wildly dyslexic. My form teacher kept a cane above the blackboard called Brother Sunshine, which he used to beat us with. I suppose nowadays you wonder whether he actually enjoyed doing that. It was a bit sad, I suppose, looking back on it, and certainly schools aren't like that anymore. In the Easter holiday, age 15, I saw an ad for an assistant photographer in an advertising studio and went along with my mum for an interview. I got the job and never went back to school. And even in my first job in 1963, we did prints for logos from glass plates to put on ads. So it's amazing how quickly photography has changed. And also the things that I worked with in the studio, the advertising studio I worked in, we had illustrators, we had amazing skills, airbrush artists, paste-up artists, typographers, hot metal typesetting, hand lettering artists. You could actually see the talent dripping off their fingers. Sadly, all of these skills are now gone, replaced by Mac computers, which I think is the way the world moves. I don't think we can stand in the way of technology. Times are going to change. Certainly, dealing with a glass plate is a lot harder than dealing with a digital file.
That's true. But like you were saying earlier, though, that digital file may fade over a short amount of time, relatively short, but that glass plate, that platinum printing.
Well, a digital file is a wonderful thing. I'm not sure that I'm probably going to upset some of your listeners, but I'm not sure that the modern trend on shooting on film makes a lot of sense to me. Film was never that sharp. We never viewed it in the same way that we viewed a digital file. And if you have a really nice image on film, the first thing you do is scan it. So it becomes second generation immediately. Whereas a digital file is just like a negative. It's a starting point with amazing opportunities. It's worse because you do have to, there's a significant cost in film and in processing. And there's also rather a large amount of waiting time while you get it back. Whereas a digital file, you have it immediately. You can use it like a painter does. You can take a picture, step back and look at it and change and move things and change the lighting. So it's a much more exciting medium to be working in.
I am of an age. I remember when we would take our film from our cameras to a drugstore, and then they would ship off to a developer and come back. And some developers were good, some developers were horrible. And my friends and I would talk and say, "Oh, go to this store. They've got a better developer, better process than this store." But yet we would have to wait a week, maybe 2 weeks to get those photos back. And, you don't know until you get it back if it's any good or not. And again, that's just me being an amateur, me, being the point and click guy. But with digital, I think you're right on that. You can get that instant, if it's good or not, and then you can play around with it and it decreases that time between.
Well, it has lots of things like, it's great with mixed lighting. It's great with long exposures. It's got autofocus that you can cut your fingers on, and latitude more than anything else. You have huge latitude, whereas if you're shooting on a transparency, you've got it more than a stalk or so under or over. You don't really have anything that you can use. I mean, talking about developing your film, that reminds me of one of the great misses in the fact that Kodak ended up going bankrupt, who they'd actually invented a digital camera and decided to hide it in a cupboard because they didn't want to lose the selling cameras and selling film and processing it and doing prints. Really, with any kind of brains, they could actually have been at.
That's true.
There was somewhat of a miss there, I think.
And I'm noticing, and I don't know if it's Kodak, I think it's Polaroid that's doing it, and I don't know who owns who in the photography world, but I've been seeing Polaroid is coming back with their Instacams where, you take a picture, it produces something for you, you gotta wait 15 or 20 seconds, wave it around, and boom, you have your picture there. I see that coming back, but I don't see a lot of people using it. With my work group, we had an outing together, and somebody had one of those cameras and they took a picture of us, and I looked at it and I said, I'm sure somebody really enjoys Polaroids. If Andy Warhol was still alive, I'm sure he would enjoy that. But I look at it and go, but then right behind me, I have my vinyl collection. And I'm sure a lot of people are like, well, you're hearing the hiss and the pop and all that. But for me, it's like, but it's vinyl. It sounds so much better to me. And then I have a physical copy of something, the artwork that goes with the cover and all that.
The beautiful covers, yeah. But you can't, unlike a phone or a camera, you can't send a Polaroid picture to somebody. So it loses out, but I'm sure it's entertaining.
So Peter, we've talked somewhat about your past here. What do you think is the most impactful lesson that you learned that has improved your artistic practice?
I suppose, like I talked about the picture of my son being born, I love the idea of blagging, of getting into places, getting people, seeing somebody in the street and saying, "You look really cool. Could I take some pictures of you?" My books on London, it's trying to convince people that they let you come into somewhere like 10 Downing Street or, really private government places. And, there's almost an art form in blagging there, I think. And for me, the theatre book I did with Michael Coveney and Sir Mark Rylance was just so much fun. That became easy because most of the theatre and the chains wanted to be in the book. But the idea of going above the stage, under the stage, dressing rooms, lighting, was just so much fun. The thing about theatres is we pay our money and we go and sit down and look forward in the dark to be entertained. We don't see the fantastic heritage and also the kind of the feeling in the fabric of the building. We have such beautiful theatres, just as you have. So I'm blagging my way in, going into the flower market to find what the latest flower is in, and chatting up to the guys and getting their input and their support, and a bit of fun. What new interesting flowers have you got in today? That sort of thing. And blagging, I think, for anybody is good.
Absolutely. Being a theater person myself, I did that through college, through high school and college, and I can tell you the backstage is where the fun is. Absolutely. Reading stuff that I wrote on set pieces, on flats. I still remember that to this day, going into people's dressing rooms and seeing that as an everyday thing. Just the view of the audience when because I did lighting design and I was an electrician, so I was hanging lights, and we had little walkways where we could, hang lights and view from above. Just getting that view of an audience, you can't get that anywhere else except for a book like yours. So I'm excited to get that book in my hands and take a look at it and go, oh yeah. He got back there. Wow. How did he do that?
Like, you will not be disappointed. It's such a lovely, just because we don't see what goes on, and, kind of simple things that you discover about theatres. I mean, when we go and see a great show, we don't really know just how much graft and effort has gone into making, or cost gone into making it happen. We've had a lot of theatres. Theatre Royal Drury Lane was one of the ones that I did before it was renovated and afterwards. They've spent in excess of 60 million on and even the scaffolding cost them £1 million. But I mean, it's such a beautiful place now. They've just, Mr. Andrew Lloyd Webber has done a beautiful update of the theatre.
I need to fly over there next week and take a look at it. I just, forget work, forget school going on. We're just going to fly over there next week and find out. What's the next project after Monochrome comes out? What are you looking forward to do next?
I guess there's another section to my platinum work, which is nudes. Lots of what I consider tasteful and interesting nudes with masks and contortionists and things. So I've kind of talked to Sam about the possibility of that. I think he's a little bit uncomfortable about it, but let's just see how successful this one is. And then, that would be something I'd love to do, because I think that's a really interesting part that you can see on my websites.
The link is going to be in the show notes for everybody. So I'm going to highly recommend folks go to the website, look at Peter's portfolio that he has listed up there. I've gone through many portions of it, and from the time that we did the pre-interview until today, I was checking that out and just going, wow, I get the pleasure to talk to this man who has made these photographs. I'm the luckiest man alive.
I'm the luckiest man alive. You're very sweet. Well, I mean, have a look at, I'd love people to look at the website and see some of the fine art stuff and the nudes, and there's a whole section from the theatre books. And I think that it's that to me is, to be able to share that with people is really lovely. In fact, all of the London books, as a born and bred Londoner, it's the most amazing place. And I always thought I knew so much about London, but there is so much different stuff going on in London. It's endless.
Well, if you ever do a book of Paris or Chicago, I am all about either one of those, because I'm originally from Chicago. And when I went to Paris before my girls were born, I took a number of pictures of Paris that I still have to this day. As a matter of fact, on my computer background, I have this beautiful, and I'm going to send it to you, I promise, this beautiful picture of the Eiffel Tower, just not the whole thing, but from a unique viewpoint, a unique perspective of it. And so if you ever do a book of either one of those, and the nudes book, if that does actually happen for you, you automatically have the first guy that's going to be the first pre-order for any of those books.
My final work is a journey of discovery. I am experimenting with different processes, lenses and techniques such as X-rays, mammograms, limited focus, anamorphic lenses, solarization. I'm always looking for and photographing people, things and places that I find visually stimulating. A lot of my work starts as a clean piece of paper, putting the ingredients together. It might be an object or a collaborative model style hair and makeup artist, and seeing what magic occurs. Or it might even be a visit to Covent Garden Flower Market very early in the morning. I don't just want to take pictures, I want to create them. This led me to work with the father and son team of Paul and Max Gaffel of 31 Studios in Gloucester, England, the specialist platinum printers in the UK. And a little bit about process. We start off with handmade French watercolor paper, which is hand-coated with a palladium emulsion from Santa Fe using a goat's hair brush. It's a huge, amazing skill to be able to paint an emulsion onto a piece of paper without any drips or marks. It's then an interleg is made of the image so that the print will be made the same size as the interleg. So the negative is laid onto the paper with the emulsion on it. And as in the old days, it would have been exposed by daylight or sunlight. Nowadays, it's done with ultraviolet light. And the printer will sit there with goggles on and will use his hands to dodge light and dark areas on the print. Again, another kind of, I guess, a sort of chemical magic, I guess, in some ways. And then when it's exposed, it goes into a solution of potassium oxalate, which I'm sure nobody like me will absolutely understand. And it develops instantly, which is very different from the traditional bromide prints where you could, if it came up too quickly, you could pull it out, or if it needed to go a bit darker, you could leave it a bit longer. But you get this instant print, followed by putting it in a tray of warm water and agitate it to remove as much of the developer as possible. And also the book has a whole chapter where Max Gaffel is described with words and pictures explaining the platinum process, which is making the book slightly into a DIY book. Maybe that's a big ask with the chemicals involved, but it's nice to share that. Also, as I said, explaining about working with other people, you buy into different things. A lot of the pictures in the book are what is called solarized, or the technical name is the Sabata effect. It was named after, which is when the dark and lights are reversed, becoming a hallmark of surrealist photography. Man Ray worked with solarization after his muse. One of my favorite photographers, Lee Miller, was in the darkroom, let out a yell, and turned on the light when a mouse crawled across her foot. The negative was exposed and the old technique was reborn again. So I think that's a little bit of the history behind it, but it's the fact that it creates something completely different. Mm-hmm. And some of the pictures are shot with an anamorphic lens, which is sort of like a cinematographic lens. It's a sort of an oval lens. So if you were photographing people, if you have it flat way around, you have little flat people. If you spin it around, you can have upright people. Mm-hmm. And if you put it halfway across, you can have sort of people moving off flying. So it's things like that, and you can see that in some of the flowers they're just distorted. What can I say? I mean, there's a famous picture of Holbein called The Ambassadors, where in the foreground of the picture is a skull that has been stretched anamorphically. So it's something that's a bit of fun, but it really is chemical alchemy. It's quite something. So, I mean, that's the joy of finding experts and buying into their ability to experiment on my behalf and take them to places that they wouldn't have gone to without me kind of saying, can we try it out? And what can we do there? Mm-hmm. So I hope it's going to inspire some people. I mean, there were famous photographers like Irving Penn, who did his own platinum prints, and exhibited them, which is quite a skill. I'm not the kind of person that wants to be master of every technology. Mm-hmm. Love being able to buy into other people's expertise.
That's a great way to be. Kind of a jack of all trades, not a master of one singular process, because then that can lock you into that process. And, just think of all the other things that you can do if you are dangerous in all these other processes. And that's one thing that I love doing, is I love being dangerous in all these other processes, in my poetry, theater, podcasting, music, all the things that I dive into, which is probably too many things, but that's okay. It makes me happy at the end of the day.
That's what I said. It's experimenting and trying things, taking yourself to somewhere that you wouldn't have gone, on your own. And just, the lovely thing about experiment is you can make mistakes and do it wrong and learn by it. But, you might just make a mistake that really works, that is unusual. What is going to be the next great thing? Somebody's going to discover it.
I think Bob Ross said it best, is we don't make any mistakes. We do happy accidents. Yeah. And I definitely agree with that for sure. Well, Peter, thank you so much for taking time out of your day to talk with me here on Create Art Podcast. I really appreciate your time and the education that you have just given me and your generosity in this. Thank you so very much for agreeing to be on the show here. And is there any final thought that you'd like to give the listeners of Create Art Podcast?
I'd just like to say a little bit about the book Monochrome. It's going to be published this October. It's available to pre-order from people like Barnes & Noble and Amazon and all good bookshops. It comes in a case and has some very lovely typography in it, and hope people enjoy it. It's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much for your company. It's been great fun.
And next time I interview you, I'll make sure to have tea ready, and I can't wait for your next books to come out, especially the nudes. And if you do a Chicago one or a Paris one, I'll be there for that one as well.
Okay, I'm on it.
Excellent. All right. So that was Peter Dazeley, folks. You're going to have all the links in the show notes to Peter and all of his work, and to Trope Publishing. So I want to definitely thank them and Lauren Bell with Trope Publishing for introducing me to Peter Dazeley. And wow, this was a wonderful interview, just a wonderful time that I had with Mr. Dazeley, and it gave me a better appreciation for the art of photography. I'm hoping that, you can find some usefulness of the information and the knowledge that he has shared with us. Now it comes to the part of the show where I want to thank you for being a part of the conversation that I had with Peter Dazeley. Without you, it's just me and Peter talking into the ether, and nothing gets accomplished. It's a great conversation, but nothing gets accomplished in the world. So that's why I'm asking you, if you have found any value in this interview at all, I want you to go ahead and share it with a friend. I also am always on the lookout for feedback. So if this was not a 5-star interview, if you felt that it could have been better, feel free to email me, timothy@createartpodcast.com, and I'd be happy to take that feedback and possibly utilize it in a future show. This show is not possible without you out there listening to it. So I definitely want to thank you for listening to it. And I also want to let you know about my other show that I have. It's called Find a Podcast About, where I help you outsmart the algorithm and find your next binge-worthy podcast. And you can find that at findapodcastabout.xyz. You know where to find this podcast, createartpodcast.com. You know how to contact me, timothy@createartpodcast.com. And I'm looking forward to our next show and to our next interview that comes up real soon here. Now, as I like to end the show, go out there, tame that inner critic, create more than you consume. Go buy all of Peter Dazeley's books. The links will be in the show notes. Make sure that you're buying the newest one too, Monochrome. And go out there and create some art for somebody you love, yourself. I'll talk to you next time.